we look at it as an additional crew member. The crew looks at it as an additional crew member, and in fact refers to the FreshAi assistant as she most of the time. So that is one huge learning for me, that consumers are becoming more and more willing to adopt technology.
Welcome to Technovation. I'm your host, Peter High. My guest today is Matt Spessard. Since February of 2024, Matt's been the Chief Information Officer of the Wendy's Company, a quick-serve restaurant company that earns in excess of $2 billion in annual revenue and has more than 7,000 restaurants worldwide. Matt's been with Wendy's for more than 4.5 years, including a tenure as Global Chief Technology Officer. During his tenure, he's helped drive significant enhancements to employee and customer service with digital technology, as well as major implementations of artificial intelligence. I look forward to hearing more about each of these and other topics through this conversation. Matt has spent the lion's share of his career in the restaurant and QSR industries, and his role prior to joining Wendy's was as the head of technology at Sonic Drive-In. Matt, welcome to Technovation. It's great to speak with you today.
Thanks for having me, Peter.
No, it's a great pleasure. Well, Matt, maybe we begin with Wendy's. Certainly most people, at least in the American audience and international for that matter, where you're in those markets, would be familiar with Wendy's, but always good from a table setting perspective to hear directly from you, an executive with the organization, a bit more about the business in your own words. Could you provide that, please?
Yeah, if you've somehow managed to not get one of our hamburgers at this point, I would say what you need to know about Wendy's is that we are fanatic about serving fresh, never frozen beef to our fans all throughout the globe, with more than 7,000 restaurant locations across many countries.
A good overview indeed. And if I can continue with the background information, talk a bit about your Chief Information Officer role. What's within your purview as CIO?
Yeah, so as I think you provided an overview, I've been in this role since February of 2024. And I'm really responsible for all aspects of Wendy's global technology efforts, from restaurant technology, data management and analytics, enterprise technology, and software engineering to information security. And really, I think as you reflect on those responsibilities, I'd also share that a big part of my job is driving growth across Wendy's digital channels and really working to improve the customer and crew experience through the most strategic implementation of technology solutions and innovation that we can find to be able to effectively drive the business. And so whether it's leveraging things like generative AI to reimagine the drive-thru experience, or the launch of our leading edge platform for data and analytics inside of our organization as well, we're certainly, I think, always looking for ways to optimize the business model.
Really interesting. And I'd love to dive into multiple topics that you've already raised there. I want to talk first about digital channels. You talked about driving growth through digital channels. Naturally, of course, yours is a business that is at the end of the day very tactile. But talk a bit about those digital channels and the means of engagement with customers, especially since we're talking about revenue first and foremost, that growth. Talk a bit about the means of engagement through digital channels.
Yeah, well, first, I mean, I would just say we've kind of given our digital footprint a makeover. We launched new CRM and loyalty capabilities in 2024, while also rebuilding our own digital platform and mobile app. So certainly, it's been a year full of improvements, I would say, and we've seen some really great business results associated with that. We're more than 40% higher in digital revenue in 2024 than we were in 2023. And a lot of that is, again, due to these new technologies that we've leveraged through the channels that we have. So whether it's the new mobile app that we've built, our web experience, or the kiosks that are located in our restaurants, we always try and figure out what is the right way that we can employ for our customers to be able to Wendy's on their terms.
And talk a bit about how you gather that information. There, of course, is once those tools are in place, you can see the way in they're used, the frequency of those uses, perhaps develop different personas based upon different people and locations, et cetera. But I wonder, how do you engage as you think about the fine tuning of those, or even the new introduction of aspects of the use of those? How do you engage? How does your team engage with customers to understand where to lean further in and where maybe to do so less?
Yeah, well, I'd say it's a combination of data-driven and hypothesis-driven experiments, right? We also, over the last couple of years, have been rebuilding our data estate. with the development of a customer data platform that we developed in-house. And we've been certainly fueling that platform with all of the different experiences that our customers engage us with today, and then also work to understand across a variety of different inputs how they feel about each of those different experiences. Whether it's how much friction they might encounter as a part of an experience, and how do we work to remove that, whether or not we're offering the appropriate products to them, and if we need to tune that. So we take all those inputs, and then we use that data to derive, again, a number of different experiments. And we try to really do that in an iterative way. So we may offer, a particular product at a certain time of day for a customer cohort to understand if that is more relevant to them. We may make small changes to the app and deploy that to a small portion of our user base to understand with some A/B testing, right? Is this going to work better for this particular cohort or not? And then we effectively just iterate, right, through these feedback loops and try and understand how we can continuously improve across both the experiences and the products that we provide.
And you mentioned earlier employee experience. You mentioned you referred to it as crew experience as well. Talk a bit about the work that you and team are doing to impact that, since of course that's the front door to so many of the customers, and so improving that experience, no doubt, is it something that in the end also improves customer experience.
Yeah, I would say the interesting part of this is there's two aspects, right? One, I would say there's all of the existing technology that we have in our restaurants, and how do we make that better for our crew, easier to use, in ensuring that it's available, right, and reliable, those types of things. And so we've actually been, over the last year and really throughout this year, we're upgrading our restaurant technology and infrastructure inside of the restaurants to ensure that we are on the latest and greatest point of sale version, that we have good network connectivity. We're planning to launch obviously more technology capabilities over time. And so we want to make sure that we have technology that the crew can depend on that's easy to operate. So there's that facet. And then I think there's also this facet of how do we look for new ways to innovate and improve the experience. And I think that's really where a technology like our FreshAi platform comes into play. Because while initially, we were setting out to understand how do we basically redefine this drive-through experience in a way that resonates with the way that our customers might want to interact with us. And if you go back into our history, we've got a long relationship with the drive-through, right? I mean, we effectively Dave Thomas developed the modern day pickup window in 1970. And I think we've constantly been trying to figure out how do we really own that drive-through space the best that we can. But when you think about FreshAi, we were trying to understand, hey, is there a way for us to offer an experience for our customers that has high quality in its interaction, has the ability to improve accuracy as a result of the order taking process, and really can have a similar conversation that you would have with one of our crew members, while also improving that crew member experience inside of the restaurant by freeing those folks up to be able to do tasks that are more focused on making sure that the right things go into the right bag and get to the right customer, and also provide the smiles and the warmth at the end of the interaction that we would expect for them to provide to build the relationship with our customers that we would want them to. So we're also looking for other areas like that over time. Again, we want to optimize the customer experience and deliver value for them, but we also want to make it easier for the crew on the other side. So we always look through both lenses. Yeah,
super interesting. And boy, it sounds like a lot of work afoot to continue to modernize the ways of working with the crew as well as on behalf of customers. I want to talk a bit further about the development of FreshAi. Having a tool like that is easier said than done. The ingredients necessary to bring that to life, the foundation that needs to be laid in order to do so effectively, itself takes quite a bit of work. And I wonder if you could take us back what I would imagine is probably multiple years to the methods that you use to get your data in the sort of order to enable something like FreshAi to come about.
Certainly, I would like to say it was as well thought out as you just articulated in terms of the curation of the data before we went down the path of determining the right way to layer generative AI on top, but I think it was a bit more iterative and experiment driven than that. And so if I just take a little bit of a step back, a couple of years ago, we had really probably about 3 years ago, now that I'm thinking about it, we had started on this path of really trying to master small scale experiments through our innovation pipeline and try and understand, are there technologies that we could use to solve a particular business problem? And we became fanatic about this process of let's basically industrialize this idea that we prove value early or we eject things out of the pipeline. And the reason why that's important is because that's really where what is now FreshAi started. It started with this idea or hypothesis of, could we actually have a conversation with a customer and leverage a technology to be able to automate the order taking process? And we would just wanted to start with one item. Is there one item that we could do that with? And there are a couple of different technologies that you could use to solve that type of problem, right? I mean, at that point in time, generative AI was not necessarily as ubiquitous as it is today. And certainly rule-based AI solutions were actually promulgating the environment all over the place. And so we kind of put our toe in the water in each of these scenarios, right? To try and understand at first, from a role-based scenario, could we bring this to life before going further down the generative AI path? And the thing that was interesting about the role-based solution that quickly came to bear, could we answer the question of taking the order or not? The answer is yes. What we found is as we started to try and expand the menu, develop the rules and the guardrails for the conversations that might need to be had, and do that in a way that could actually scale to a restaurant pilot, it was very difficult. The complexity was, I would argue, at least an order of magnitude greater than we thought it was when we just tried to, with a laptop on a counter, get one order taken. So we had developed this partnership with Google Cloud, and we had been working with them initially on this and really started to go down this path of, hey, like generative AI is becoming more and more prevalent in the space. We don't think this rule-based version of conducting an interaction is going to work with us. Where could you maybe lean in and try and help us out a bit? And that's where we started to partner with their team to think about how to make that move from a role-based solution to something that actually leveraged generative AI. And so at that point, what we did was moved away from the construct that we had up to that point and actually used the menu data to train a large language model and basically teach it to speak Wendy's. And so from there, we started iterating on those types of interactions and capturing the feedback from each loop and then understanding how we could basically make it just a little bit better each time. And once we got to the point where we could actually go through a full turn of a conversation and place an order and be able to ask some more conversational questions and let folks use synonyms that they would use for other products, it became much easier to see the path for how we might develop this into a pilot. And from there, it rapidly accelerated, right? We got into a single restaurant pilot in the Dublin, Ohio area. And then we just kept hammering the order interface with different types of transactions, first from the technology teams and the crew members, and then we started opening up to customers for limited tests of the prototype. And then we just expanded the net broader and broader in the single location, with our team spending thousands of hours in the dining room, right? Talking to customers about their interactions, talking to the crew about the interactions. And in parallel, us demonstrating this technology to franchisees and other business leaders inside of our organization to help them understand, hey, here's what's working really well. Let's show you the progress. And then also here's some constraints that we're running into, so that the next time, we showed the technology, we could showcase those improvements, and it became a really nice feedback loop as well. But we spent a year in location one before we felt comfortable expanding to additional locations from there. We weren't necessarily interested in, just blowing up the use case to a lot of additional locations just because we could. It was very important for us that we did it right, because these are our customers that we're talking about, and the experience needed to be good.
Totally makes sense. Negative experiences out of the gate could really mar the ability to expand this. So proving that out makes all the more sense. I want to talk a bit more about the innovation process you referenced more generally speaking a few moments ago. Great framing that you provided that of having a number of ideas, but also making sure that you're proving value quickly and only proceeding forward with those that are proving that value, and then dropping the rest of those out of the pipeline. So the organization is focusing on ideas that presumably can scale and actually provide meaningful value more generally speaking. Can you talk a bit further about that process, that methodology of ideation, the generation of a variety of ideas, the experimentation that happens with presumably different members of your team, and then the vetting process to determine where value might be or where it isn't, frankly?
Yeah. Well, I'd like to say that we really invented an industry-leading innovation process. I would say what we did instead is we took relatively industrialized process around innovation, the pipeline that you would normally see evangelized in maybe a variety of different books, and then we made it maybe a bit better for Wendy's. And so the process itself, hinges around this idea of a pipeline of ideas, and the ideas could be it could be a type of technology that is up and coming that you want to understand you have business applications against. But more commonly, it's, hey, here's a business challenge that we're throwing out there that we're trying to understand if we could solve in a way that helps optimize an experience either for a creative customer. And so we have several steps in that process, from just a lightweight feasibility study, right? Both, does the technology work well enough to take it through the pipeline, and is the feasibility of the problem that we would want to go solve with this technology viable enough for us to be able to take it to the pipeline? So that's kind of stage one, right? And we have multiple stage gates throughout the process, from the initial feasibility analysis to all the way to pilot, and then ultimately this idea of like an incubator before a product launch. And at any point throughout that process, we eject ideas that obviously don't pass the muster. And I would say we consider success ejecting 6 out of 7 ideas, right?
I love the idea that it is the rejection process that actually is a determinant of success, that both it suggests pursuing a lot of ideas, a lot of green light thinking, as is sometimes referred to, and of not limiting the number of ideas, but also being brutal and ruthless in terms of what goes further forward and actually has the broader investment given to it. Can you talk a bit about the makeup of the team that focuses on this as well? Are there members of your team who focus exclusively on this innovation process, or is it a part-time job of a broader set of the team?
No, it's a full-time job, but it's a small team, right? And I think those are the best innovation teams, right? Because a lot of innovation comes from constraint to begin with. So only having a couple of folks really, I think, helps make sure that our focus is very consistent, and that we continue to evangelize this idea that we have to eject things. We simply don't have the capacity to take a lot of things through that team and all the way into production. And so this idea of ruthless prioritization and rapid prototyping that you keyed in on is incredibly important to us. And there's even a bit of a celebratory event, I would say, when we eject things from the pipeline, because we always capture and share the learnings internally, and our demo days and other areas, because even for the things that were not successful, we certainly learned something. And I think it's important for us to be able to radiate to the rest of the teams, right? What did you learn? So that we know how we would use those learnings in the future, whether we were going to take another run at a similar problem with a different type of technology, or other opportunities you might be able to imagine.
Are the team members who are involved in that, do they have special backgrounds of one sort or another? Or is it, are they longtime members of the team who just understand the processes end to end? I mean, talk a bit about the background necessary for somebody to be on that team.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I would say they are uniquely suited for the role. And the team itself it's just a handful of people with backgrounds like product leadership. There is software architecture and engineering inside of the team. And then also some really expert level business analyst chops in the mix as well. So yeah, it's really just 3 to 4 folks that are kind of a motley crew of technical depth that can be able to take us through rapidly the analysis and the prototyping piece as well, right? Like the idea that we can have somebody just build something out and then we can, destroy that infrastructure and code at the end of it once it's done is also, I think, incredibly beneficial because we don't have really any dependence on third parties in the mix, right? We can just really roll through it as rapidly as possible.
It was interesting, given the experience you've had and the commitment you have, for very good reason, given the value you're deriving from the drive-through AI that you've described. McDonald's made an attempt at this as well and abandoned it last year. And I wonder, was there any broad insights you drew from reading about or learning from that experience that was impactful to you all?
I think what I would say is we have had a lot of confidence and faith in our approach to the solution from the beginning. And I think the pacing, particularly early on, of like, let's sit in one restaurant for a year and make sure that this is viable before we scale to additional restaurants is what's given us the confidence to scale to the level that we're at now. Because today we're in just under 100 restaurants across 18 states. And we're deploying restaurants every single day because we have the level of confidence to be able to move forward and not worry about at some point, will we need to take a step backwards or pause deployment or anything like that. What we've built, we know will be able to achieve the objectives. So I'd say, the other one thing that we did learn quite a bit about is if you think back earlier in the conversation about role-based solutions, we did see a lot of different organizations deploying role-based solutions. And so we kept an eye on that as we were looking at making a change ourselves, because it was kind of a pivotal point, right? Whatever you did from there, you were going to have to be able to effectively scale, and that the change later was going to be much more complex than it would be if you just committed to the decision up front. So we did spend a lot of time analyzing what's in the marketplace, if at all, whether solutions that were available for sale or solutions that companies had built themselves that, again, were more on kind of the rule-based front. And then when we realized there wasn't really anybody that had figured out the generative AI space, we were comfortable being first, especially, I think, with a really good partner in the mix.
I mentioned at the outset, Matt, that you have a long history in the QSR business. And I wonder, now having been in it for multiple decades and seeing the state of the art become antiquated and necessary to retire with a new state of the art then being introduced, obviously different environments across the various companies that you've worked with, Yum Brands, Churches, I mentioned Sonic, just to name a few, prior to your current experience at Wendy's. Talk a bit about the evolution of the use of technology across your career, and maybe the extent to which there are some aspects that rhyme across all these experiences versus the understandable nuances that would happen from company to company.
Yeah, well, I've been in the industry 26 years. And one thing that's really interesting to me is that while technology has changed quite a bit over that time frame, the expectations of customers and crew really haven't. I mean, the bar has been raised, I think, in many cases, but the fundamentals of what people are looking for when they, come to work in a Wendy's, or if they're going through, the drive-thru to get some hot and crispy fries, the elements of it really have been relatively consistent. And the reason why that's helpful is, as you think about how to apply technology to improve things, the basis for innovation, in terms of how many things have been tried over the years, is well documented. So now, consumer trends in terms of folks' willingness to adopt technologies, I think, has changed quite a bit over time. And that's been, I think, an interesting, it's had interesting implications for how we have thought about technology innovation at Wendy's. For example, there was probably a point in time where I'm not sure we could be experimenting in some of the areas that we're experimenting in now. But the reality is, if you think about voice as a technology, right? Voice assistants have existed in homes for many years up to this point. People are relatively used to interacting with them. And if you think about the technology that we deployed it is tweaked to provide the Wendy's level of quality experience that we would want to. And I would argue it's at many steps above the experience that they would be used to in interacting with some of those other voice assistants. And which is great for us because we look at it as an additional crew member. The crew looks at it as an additional crew member. And in fact, refers to the FreshAi assistant as she most of the time. So I think that is one huge learning for me, that consumers are becoming more and more willing to adopt technology across the footprint. If I think back earlier to my career, I think that really held a lot of innovation back. Because you think about kiosks as an example, the kiosk adoption 10 years ago, when some of the early solutions were coming onto the market, was very low. Folks would, typically bypass it, go directly to the register to be able to interact with the human. And now folks are very comfortable, I think, using those technologies. And in fact, even expected, particularly with some of the younger generations. And so I think, the changing consumer and willingness to adopt technology and the consistent basis upon which restaurants operate has really helped us start to think about how to innovate more differently over time.
Yeah, very interesting. Thank you for those reflections. I wanted to ask you also, as you look to the future, are there other trends that particularly excite you? Business trends, technology trends, people trends, however you might define that. What else is on your roadmap that has you particularly excited these days?
Yeah, this is a really fun conversation to have, I think, because there are probably 3 technologies that I'm really interested in continuing to learn more and more about, both in terms of obviously the engineering behind them, but also in terms of consumer applications and restaurant applications. One is, and it's not really the newest kid on the block, but I'm a big fan of the applications of edge computing. I think as AI becomes more ubiquitous in restaurant and retail in particular, I think the need for compute that sits closer to the operation, running small models with small data sets with high speed will become more and more sought after. I think another one that I pay a lot of attention to is low Earth orbit satellite technology. And it seems like a simple concept, right? This idea that things closer to the Earth's surface are faster than things that are maybe further out in space, like geosynchronous satellites. But even at Wendy's, we benefited by deploying this technology in some of our more remote locations with really good success. So I also appreciate that it is providing connectivity in other places that might not otherwise have had access to the internet as well. And then the third trend that I find, and perhaps the most fascinating, is the idea of spatial computing. So this notion that we could virtually engineer things with our hands and abstract some of the technical complexity that could get in the way of creativity is very interesting to me. But I could definitely see someone learning how to make a Dave's double that way as well. So I'm really keeping an eye on that one.
Speaking of the Dave's double, I'm curious, what are some of your favorite menu items these days when you go into a Wendy's?
Well, spicy nugs for sure is my number one. Even if I get something else, I'm still getting spicy nugs on every single order. I'm just a huge fan of them. But also, I'm kind of more, despite the nugs being spicy, I'm a little bit maybe more boring on the other side because I am just a big fan of just a Dave single or a Dave's double, depending on how hungry I am.
I also wanted to ask you, Matt, anything you've recently read, listened to, and or watched that you would recommend to our audience? What comes to mind?
I am currently reading a book called Neuroeconomics, Decision Making in the Brain, I think is the full title. And to me, it's a very interesting book about the role of not just the active parts of your brain that you are managing as a part of like this interaction as an example, but also what's going on in the background as you think about how to interact with decision making. Now, the book is primarily about financial things, but I would say there are implications in the book that make me really reflect on a lot of different things day to day. But interesting read.
Certainly sounds like it. Thank you for the recommendation, Matt, and thank you for a great conversation beyond that. It's fantastic to hear more about your journey and the remarkable progress that you and the Wendy's team have made in recent years. And it sounds like a tremendous amount yet to come, given the continued rollout of FreshAi, among other technologies that customers and crew will be seeing more of as 2025 rolls on. But thank you so much for a great conversation today.
Oh, thank you for having me.